Thanks for doing this, Julie.
Okay, it's great to be here. I love it. Thank you, Carl.
You look wonderful, and I mean, you look like you're enjoying outside. You're on a different part of Puget Sound than you normally are.
Well, yes, I'm usually on Bainbridge Island across from Seattle, and right now we're just, I think it's east of Squim, you would say.
Oh, so you're up farther north, is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm a Camano Island fan myself. My grandparents had a cabin or a house right across the bay from Camano Island, kind of near Stanwood, that we would go up in summer
Oh,
times and love
wow.
the Puget Sound.
Yeah, I mean, I went to college up here at the University of Washington, but I'm surprised and disappointed in myself that I didn't really explore the area. So I had to wait 40 years and come back.
So what are you learning?
Well, I'm learning how beautiful it is and the water. And then, there's also so many environmental issues because, of course, there's shipping and then you have orcas. And how do you balance what we like to do and be in the water and also protect the environment? So it's kind of an interesting place from that point of view, too.
So you said UW. Are you a Seattle girl originally?
No, I'm Hood River and
Oh,
Lake Oswego.
wow,
So
I didn't know that.
yeah, so I was born in Hood River. You do know my sister Ellen Emry, don't you? Ellen Heltzel.
I don't
You,
think so.
did you see her when you're doing? Was she doing books at all for you when you were doing AM Northwest? She does that now. She does a little book segment on AM Northwest
No, I
occasionally.
missed her then.
I don't know what's happened with COVID yet, so I just missed you. But anyway, so I am the fourth of four children, and my father was born in Hood River, and so it was a big deal when they moved, and the parents were older and retired and ended up in Mountain Park. So that was in 1968.
So, and then up to the UW. Didn't you went to school with my sister up there, didn't you,
Yeah,
Sally?
I was with Sally. Yeah, so I remember I'd see Sally all the time when you came in the summer. We would end up running into each other at Black Butte Ranch
Right, yes.
for vacation.
Because she was a communications or broadcast major there as well and did her internship at King TV.
Yep.
Uh, I don't know if I might have been real close to the time that I was doing my internship at KGW. We're pretty close. But then she went into college administration and not journalism. So where did you go from UW?
So in UW, I came back to Portland briefly and was a part-time writer at Channel 2. And then all that work dried up. Of course, I didn't really realize at the time, but it was because of those ratings. It was May, and it was 1980, actually 81. And I ended up taking a job in Bend, Oregon, because I
Great.
really thought I need the first job I can get, and it happened to be Bend. And while I was there, I had applied for jobs because I had done a King internship too. And so I applied for a job at KAMR in Amarillo, and that station called me back and they said, "We want to fly you down here. We have a job you can't refuse." So I ended up going to Amarillo, Texas.
Instead of Bend or
Well, I
from
was
Bend?
in Bend for a month. My news director, Janice Folkstead, was not happy because I was her last hire. So I meant she had another hire before she moved to Portland to work or to join her husband. So
Well, that's kind of interesting because spending a lot of time here, uh, summer times here in Central Oregon, we would watch Bend TV, and people come and go very quickly at that station, at the NBC station in
yeah.
Bend,
Oh yeah.
KTVG. So you were one of those in and out.
I was one of those in and out, right?
Yeah. And then where did you and Nancy Francis work together?
That was in Bend. So she was in Bend.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but I was there a month. So other than just knowing her, and she probably laughing at me, but it was kind of clear that I was the last person hired. So I did the morning news there. And to my embarrassment, one of the most embarrassing things that I think about when you get your early start is someone called me and said, "I don't think you know how to pronounce Oregon."
Really?
Yes. So he corrected me. So I always think that's kind of funny because I thought I was a native Oregonian and had earned my chops just by growing up here. But
Well, was he right? Were you doing the Oregon thing or what was
No,
up?
I wasn't doing Oregon. Probably said Oregon, just too quickly. Probably
Okay,
enunciate enough like a 21-year-old would do.
sure. Well, that was probably the first of a million calls you were going to get from viewers about weird stuff over the years.
That's right. That's right. Anyway, so tell me why you're doing this. Tell me what's happening with this Good Old Days and how
Uh,
you came up with Good Old Days.
well, I thought of it. I heard a podcast done by Pat Cashman,
Uh-huh.
who was a Seattle radio guy and was on Almost Live. I think he lives in Bend now. I'm pretty sure he does.
Uh-huh.
And he was interviewing a friend of mine, Ed Wyatt.
Mhm.
Uh, Ed was did a writing and performing stint up with Almost Live in Seattle. Then he came down and he hosted Good Evening with Teresa Richardson before that show went away. Ed and I were high school friends, and we stayed in real good touch. And so Pat Cashman was doing an interview of Ed Wyatt about their times with Almost Live, and I really loved listening to the good old stories. And I said, there, I got a lot of friends on Facebook that are, that have been in TV, and we got a pandemic, and I can't go anywhere, and Zoom works really well.
That's awesome.
And so I was lucky enough that Kathy Smith did it for me, and Craig Walker did it for me, and Mike Donahue did it. And then so now we're sending it out to folks, and there's a pretty good group of several hundred people that enjoy reliving what we went through in the 80s and 90s in Portland. So that's it.
Yeah, well, I certainly enjoy listening to everybody, and the commonalities that I've seen. I'm amazed at how creative people are in this business, and how many different avenues people are exploring in terms of their creativity. So that's really something.
And I don't know if it's unique to this business, our business, but I've talked to people that I haven't been around or even stayed in communication with for 25 or 30 years.
Yeah.
Like Bill Lagatuda, who left KGW after a couple of years and went down to LA, and he was big time CBS. I'm lucky enough to get a hold of him, and we started talking like we were in the newsroom again 30 years ago. So that's just been really, really pleasant to be able to relive that stuff.
It is good to reconnect.
Yeah.
Do you have like a Channel 8 or there's the Channel 2 group in Facebook. Are you part of that?
I'm part of the KATU one, yes. I don't know that there's a KGW one. There's a pretty strong group of KGW friends on Facebook. And I don't know, our good friend Larry Shoup, who is at KGW, he usually has kind of a media get-together in the summertime, and we kind of, reconnect there. That's always fun. But Facebook is not, it doesn't have a great reputation, but if you can get by some of the misgivings, the fact that you can stay in touch with people that you otherwise wouldn't is really nice.
It is really nice for that reason too.
So what did Amarillo, Texas do for you? What did a Northwest girl in Texas learn?
Oh my gosh, it was so great in so many ways. It's funny. I left there in '84 and never went back until just a few years ago. We were driving my son to Texas Christian University for college. And a lot has changed. And I really thought, wow, I cannot believe I was here for 2.5 years. But I was there for 2.5 years, and I had come from Oregon. I thought Central Oregon was kind of foreign in terms of landscape. You get to Amarillo, Texas, and it was a whole new world. But there's a lot of energy in Texas, and there's a lot of positivity, I think, in there, in that sense. At that time, I was really one of the first women to even be on their local news. They were at the station that I was at, I was actually the second woman on the air in terms of anchoring the news. But the other stations had all men. So it was just a little slower than maybe Portland and other stations to change. And I was part of a Toastmasters group, and I think it was on a Monday morning. And of course, I was in the news business, so I usually worked in the evening. And I remember I'd missed quite a few Monday mornings because it was 7 a.m. for the Toastmasters. And when I did show up after about 6 weeks, I got a standing ovation. So, I mean, there was so much support just from the men there. They were so happy to have me there. And the only other woman in that group was a retired English professor from West Texas State University. So I was lucky. I mean, I've heard some of the interviews, and I know Margie Boulay, and I've heard some of her stories. So and Kathy Smith certainly, they were really on the front lines and they were really breaking the barriers. So they really experienced a lot of discrimination. In many ways, I was the second tier, so I got to do things probably in spite of my age that probably a man my age would never have been able to do.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting, just in terms of just trying to get anchors there. And I think I was 21 years old when I was anchoring the news in Amarillo. So that was pretty.
It's nice to hear that you were treated respectfully. I mean,
Yeah.
thinking of it being Texas in the South and a little bit chauvinistic, nice that that you didn't experience those kind of things. I mean, listening to Kathy and Margie and a lot of women talk, and even some of our friends who are, journalists of color, there's so much things that they had to put up with that, I was young, I was 22 years old, I was naive, and I didn't know that was going on until you hear the stories later on, and it was a battle for some folks.
Yeah. And I think there was an effect, just in terms of women, that probably there was a pressure that you recognize that was there. I wouldn't say there was probably no discrimination, and there's other stories that I could tell, but I think that for the most part, I feel very fortunate in that way, because I just sort of miss some of the outright discrimination. I think there was always sometimes attitudes that were very different that I think continued until I left, even through the time I left the business, especially when I left Channel 2, and that was in 2000, basically, or 1999.
And was there another stop between Texas and Portland?
Yeah, I was in Boston. So I went from Amarillo to Boston and was anchoring the news at WLVI Channel 56 when they still had UHF stations.
Right. Yeah.
So it doesn't exist anymore, so it went off the air. So it's kind of sad. I think. I think you can Google the YouTube, the last newscast that station had. But I was there at the very beginning of a 10 o'clock news, the first commercial newscast in Boston. So don't tell me how I got hired. I have no idea. I had an agent, and he sent my tape in. I think he was surprised as I was, if not more, that they wanted to talk to me and interview me. And he said, I have women would give their eye teeth for that job. And I was pretty overwhelmed, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Just, it was a huge jump, and I thought, what am I doing here? I have no idea. But so it's 2 years of constant anxiety, but a good experience.
Oh, good. So when you came to KATU, did you go right into that main anchoring spot?
I did. So it was kind of a strange thing, but it was a kind of a funny experience, only in the sense that my father was dying of cancer, and I was in Boston. My agent said, your contract's going to be renewed, but the general manager got sick, so they didn't renew. My contract was expiring the end of February. I had gone and interviewed in Seattle and Portland just when I was there for Thanksgiving, just to kind of for any job openings. My dad's dying, just to get back on the West Coast. And Channel 2 said, we have so many anchors, we'll never have anchors. I actually got an interview at Channel 2 because I'd interned basically there, been a part-time news writer. So they talked to me, but Alan Goldberg talked to me, but they weren't planning to hire me or they didn't even think they had an opening. And then Tracy left for Channel 8, and Denise Kovacevic, she got hired. Remember, she went to Good Morning America, if you remember her.
Yeah. And
so suddenly they had very few anchors, only Melissa Mills. And so it just turned out that, and then the funny story about it, Bill O'Reilly had been anchoring at Channel 2 right before me. And he was such a character and complained about the rain all the time. I think one of the advantages of why I even got that job is because I was a native Oregonian. We're like, well, she won't complain about the weather. That was about my qualification for the job. So it's pretty funny.
That's probably the most calm or tame thing Bill O'Reilly did while he was in Portland.
Yeah, he had some stories that are legendary.
Yeah.
Sure, so it's kind of funny, but so that was how I got there. I ended up. So literally what happened in terms of timing, the last day of my contract in Boston, I got the job at Channel 2. So it was an awkward conversation, to say the least, when I went into the general manager and said, that contract has expired and I can leave, and I'm going to leave in a week.
Well, at
They're
least it
pretty
wasn't.
upset about it.
At
It was
least it
kind of
wasn't 1 month like Ben.
yeah, no, I'd been there 2 years. I just
Yeah.
think that they weren't prepared that I would leave. I don't think they had any reason to think I would ever go anywhere else, because I was
Yeah.
pretty lucky to get that job. And they had my face painted on this billboard. So, like, quick, get the whitewash, because she's not on that billboard anymore. So it was kind of a strange thing, strange
I,
transition.
I hope you got a good picture of yourself with a billboard before you got out of town.
I don't even think I have a picture of that billboard. I know. Isn't that funny? I've looked around. I'm just now starting to go through some of that old news stuff and realize, wow, there's things I don't even have. But I have a taxi cab billboard. But what do you do with that too? So there we were on a taxi cab, Jack Hines and I have that. But who? I mean, other than maybe putting it in the garage, but I don't even think we want it in the garage.
I used to have just a big, it was like, 36 inches by 24 inches, just headshot that used to hang up at KGW behind the desk,
Yeah.
the entry desk. And it was like,
Yeah, that was great.
what do I do with that now? I mean, can you imagine the ego to put that right back there? And, it's me 30 years ago with no gray hair and
Yeah.
30 pounds ago.
I know. Who's going to really want that? Maybe dartboard could be a good dartboard background. I don't know. But yeah, who's going to want that? Your kid's going to, I mean, I don't know what we're going to do with all that.
Yeah, and I did leave KATU with a poster, pretty big poster of me and Natalie, Rhonda, and Michael, the morning team, which, it was a great picture of the four of us. And I love, the fact that we got to do that. And then, what I do with it now, it's rolled up someplace in the attic because, so someday when I pass away, my kids go through the attic, they go, oh, look, there's Dad, and get rid of it. So who did you join on the anchor desk right off the top? Because Jeff Gianola,
yeah,
he was there?
from the beginning. Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I remember Jeff started as a weather guy at 2.
Yeah, he started as a weather guy, and I think he had just gotten the main anchor job, and then Tracy left. So
that was the birth of Jeff and Julie.
The Jeff and Julie, 1986.
Yeah.
How about that? That sounds like a long time ago, because it was.
And do you remember when we first met? Because I do.
Oh. If we met, was it on a story?
No.
Oh, it wasn't. Oh, then I don't know. When was it?
I was doing the morning news with Nancy, Francis, and Teresa. I was actually doing sports on the little half-hour newscast before the Today Show. We met because I remember Nancy telling me, well, you're going to be there with Julie. You really like her. And I said, oh, great. Playing on a celebrity volleyball team at the Portland State University.
Fortunately, that is gone from my memory. I can't even imagine me playing volleyball. I mean, I want to break out in hives just thinking about it. Like, first of all, what was I wearing? I hope I wasn't wearing little short shorts.
Oh,
and
no.
On top of that, it's like.
That I would have remembered.
Yeah, that you might have remembered even more. But that's so cute. I don't remember that because I'm not really known for my athletic ability. So I don't know.
I don't think many of us on that celebrity volleyball team could be known for athletic ability.
So what happened? Did we win? Did we lose? What was that about? I can't remember.
Other than the great memory of meeting you there, I can't tell you anything else that happened.
And you were doing sports then. So I do remember that you were in sports, but because that's why I was thinking there was only a couple stories that I did when I first got there. But one story I remember because it was in Vancouver and it was a death penalty case.
Wesley Allen Dodd.
No, it wasn't Wesley Allen Dodd. I can't remember who it was. It was in Vancouver though, when they were sentencing the person. And I think they ruled that he was going to receive death penalty, but it would be Washington State, so it was Clark County. But what I remember is at that time they had one camera in the courtroom, and you would be the pool because they didn't want every camera, but that was kind of a big deal to allow cameras to be in the courtroom. So there was someone that was running the camera, and then afterwards, and I had come from Boston where you'd have flanks of reporters and photographers, and I kind of had my own system. And they had a system whereas if you were a reporter and you were in the way, a camera person would just put his hand on your shoulder, like, get out of my shot. And so you're just sort of respectful of everybody's shot, right? Just sort of that kind of thing. So at this particular time, there was another photographer from another station, and I apparently kept getting in his way, like especially afterwards when the attorneys were walking out. And he said to me, "You were in my way." And I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Just, just tap me and I'll get no here." And so it was just like being put in my place. Like, this is not how we do things here. And I don't know where you came from. So it was pretty fun.
And so, Jeff, you guys were, as I remember, you and Jeff were pretty much tops in the ratings there at KATU for quite a while. I mean, you guys were good. You guys were promoted well, and that was good for KATU. How did the switch to coin happen? I think Jeff went first, didn't he?
He did. Yeah, and that was sort of an unfortunate thing. At that point, we had a new station manager and general manager. It had been fairly new, maybe the last year or two, and they were married. They had come from Como.
Wow, that's weird to start out. Just here's the two bosses and they're married.
Well, and it was kind of secret for a while, so it was quite the drama and the whole story. And I think they had come from Como, and we had been there 13 years together. So I think they just thought it's time to shake things up. So instead of don't mess with success, they kind of had a different idea that they needed to reframe the whole program and create their own story. And I think there was that kind of intention and pressure. And so when Jeff left, it was very much a surprise even to me. But I think it was something, and I don't want to speak for him about why he left, but I think he felt that it's very hard to stay in a place when they don't act like they even want you there versus a place that's saying, "Oh my gosh, we want you here. What can we do for you?" And so Jeff left, and then I was there, and it was very clear that they had a new couple that came on.
Kathy Marshall and John, right?
And John. And they were treated really, really well. At least I just remember, it's so petty. I hate to even say it, but one of the things is you're preparing for the news and you're trying to figure out what's coming down. Maybe you're even watching the national news at that time. I don't know what it looks like now, but I remember you always wanted a monitor kind of close to your desk so you could kind of be watching what's going on yourself. And they were like, "No, we don't have a monitor for you." And then he gets this brand new one. They unloaded it that had come, and it was just like, oh, wow. Okay. And internet was a big deal. It was just starting. So he had the first internet that were usually up until then, that time, we were sharing it as a newsroom. So he had his own, so we had software, but it was just a whole different program. We didn't have the news like we did now. We maybe had AP files that we could look at, but it was just that beginning transition of computers and TV. So anyway, and at that time I ended up, my mother died, and that was sort of one of the motivating forces for me to leave Channel 2. And I really didn't go right to Channel 6. I really took a leave of absence for about 2 years, and then was offered a job there. I wasn't, so that's kind of how that worked out.
And just going back a couple seconds, your kids were born where you at KATU, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I think when you had your twins, I remember the live shot from your hospital room. That had to be, I think it might have been, were they born in a ratings month?
Hospital room. I think it was when I was, oh my gosh. Yeah, when I left Channel 2, it was pretty funny. I absolutely made Darren Lindman, Paul Lindman's son, who was working, he was producing this little segment on me leaving. I said, "You have to take that shot out. You cannot put that shot in. I've lived through it. I don't have to live through it again." But they came up because I was on bed rest for the twins.
Yeah.
And so they came up, and I was, bigger than a barn. And everyone, I don't know. And I'm sure, I don't even know. I haven't even looked at it, but I'm sure the way they shot it probably could have maximized it, a lower shot looking up at this huge belly. I don't know. I don't know what happened, but I can't tell you how many people say, yeah, I can't quite get that shot out of my mind, which I'm so sorry about. I apologize to everyone who can't get that out of their mind.
Well, that seemed to be, I mean, I can't remember if it happened during a Radies month, but I just seemed to me that your family advancement to twins was utilized as a promotional tool a little bit.
Well, what had happened, which was so ironic, is actually I was pregnant with our daughter first. So that was 1990 when she was born. And I had, at that time, done a whole series on pregnancy. But that was okay because, I mean, I was interested in the topic. So it's sort of like, sure, I'll do some series on that because I'm interested in doing that myself. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So then with that story, I left Channel 2 for because I had Vacation Use It or Lose It at the end of Christmas, and she was due January 23rd. I mean, she was due January 3rd and was not born until January 3rd of 1990. So for an entire month, and I'm not kidding, they had to say, good evening, Channel 2 is Julie has not had her baby. Almost every night. Didn't called and said, why did you say that? And I had tape recorded. At that point, I did a regular kind of feature called Family Matters. So I had recorded something that said, hi, I'm Julie Emry and I'm having a little family matter of my own, but I'll be back and da, 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 da. So when people heard that, they thought I had had the baby and that they hadn't broadcast it. And so they were calling the station and upset. So every night they had to say, yeah, she hasn't had her baby. So so that I couldn't even watch the news because I felt like I was, not having my baby, and I was supposed to have a baby weeks ago. And I didn't go back to work because I was really big and uncomfortable and 9.5 months pregnant. So why would I go back for one day? So it was this really awkward time. So then I decided, well, if I ever get pregnant again, boy, I am just going to be totally on the QT. There's no series. And then I have twins. And, if you have twins, you're 3-4 months pregnant. And people are like, when's your baby due? And you're like,
yeah,
November, and it's July. And they're like, really? Like, oh my God, what have you got in there?
2?
What are you giving birth to? Yeah. So that was so it was very hard to be on the QT and all that stuff. So let me take this whole thing off since I'm not using it.
Oh, well, I think I have met at least one of your sons was up here last summer here at Black Butte Ranch where I live. Wasn't he? I think he was here.
Sure. He, under COVID, with the COVID thing, was he?
Yeah, he was hanging out for a while.
Both of our sons came down. We don't have a house there anymore, which is sad. But so it was nice that they took advantage of an empty house since we've moved further north, and it became harder and harder to be there, and it was a big transition. But he loved it there. He worked there. All our kids worked at Black Butte at one point, so that was fun. At least one summer.
Good memories for the family. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the one thing you mentioned, what Jeff said about moving from KATU to Coin, about being, leaving one place and being wanted or, being treated.
Yeah.
I found that too when I went from KGW to KATU, and not that when I was at KGW, I wasn't mistreated and I wasn't disrespected, but when I moved to a new place, I could not believe the feeling of warmth and welcome, and we're excited you're here, and here's what we want to do with you. I mean, it was just a new experience that I hadn't felt for 20 some years when I started at KGW, and it was all exciting and, we're going to teach you this and you're going to be part of that. I can really, everybody who's changed stations knows what it's like to get someplace where you're no longer part of the furniture, you're something new and exciting, and people are glad you're there.
Yeah. So it's kind of a whole new thing. It is kind of a whole new invention. And I was really only at Channel 6 for 2 years, and that was a pretty good experience. Unfortunately, the people that hired me were fired before I actually even went to work there.
Yeah.
Other than the news director, he was there, but he was very unhappy for those 2 years, I think. Rick Howard. So,
Oh, I remember Rick. Yeah.
Yeah.
What stories stick out in your mind as the ones that really impacted you while you were anchoring the news and reporting the news in Portland?
Well, I don't know if you remember, obviously, I think the biggest one for me would be the Romania story. Did you remember that I did that? You probably wouldn't even know, but
No.
2020 was sort of the first broadcast. ABC News 2020
Yeah.
had done a story about the Romanian orphans. And then I ended up knowing Jory and Ron Kincaid. He's a minister and a Presbyterian minister, and his wife, he had actually married me, and his wife was saying, we're going to go to Romania, and I think we're going to be able to adopt a baby in 1 week. And so I was with Jennifer Lauk, who was she was an author, and was a producer at the time, and she said, why don't you pitch this as a story? So sure enough, I did. And I mean, to my surprise, Mike Devlin said, oh, okay, that'd be great. You'll be back. So Wendy Revac was the photographer, and I went to Romania, and it was crazy. And first of all, I hadn't done that much kind of reporting at all anyway. So that was kind of an interesting feat in terms of just how you manage a story like that. I don't even know. And we didn't have an interpreter. So we did have an interpreter, but not really for us, and how you'd arrange that. I mean, plus it was international. And I'd also pitched a story because if you're ambassador to, from Oregon, an Oregon businessman, ambassador to Romania. So I also said, hey, this Oregon guy is the ambassador. And I could not get a hold of them before we left. So I thought, oh my gosh, I promised that we'd have a story on the Oregon ambassador, what I'm going to do. And we're sitting in Frankfurt. And for some reason, I started talking to the woman on this little plane from Frankfurt to Bucharest, to Romania. And it was Mrs. Green. It was his wife. And I said, I've been trying to reach you. I don't know how to get a hold of you. I need to do an interview. And she said, Joan Green. And she said, oh, well, just come Thursday and da-da-da-da. So we actually got the interview with them on top of that, of what I promised. So
that's great journalism right there. Serendipity.
Serendipity. And then we had this amazing story. There was no baby, but it was actually the first thing that I would, if you went back and looked at it, is kind of a reality TV is how we ended up doing the story. So the whole drama was this couple goes over, they're going to these different orphanages and places. So you kind of told the story. And then you also were wondering, are they going to get the baby and what's going to happen? So because I remember it was over Thanksgiving, and Paul Lindman said, I was so annoyed. My brother-in-law came in and said, we got to watch the news. We got to find out what happens on that story. So that was kind of the impact of that. But more than that, so many people were moved by the stories of the orphanages that after a while, it was kind of overwhelming because I felt like I was the Romania reporter because there were so many other stories to follow up, given the fact that I was anchoring. So there aren't that many stories you can do while you're anchoring too. But I would do all these stories on Romania, and there was a nurse that had worked at Emmanuel who quit her job and went over there and got Northwest Medical Teams at the time. Now it's Medical Teams International, but Northwest Medical Teams to be involved and adopt an orphanage. And then we went back. Then about 2 years later, we went back, that time with medical teams, and were there for a Christmas story. And my husband joined me on that trip. So I went to Romania twice through Channel 2, which is pretty amazing, given that all kind of travel was starting to really not, be stopped at that point.
You were the Romanian correspondent.
I was. There was a huge connection.
And did I miss something? Did the first couple not get the baby they wanted to adopt?
Well, they did. In the series, or what we reported, they did get a child, but it came later. So They actually never got the baby in. So that was kind of hard on the story, but anyway, they later did. So
I did a series of stories on the transplant program at OHSU.
Oh, wow.
And we spent a lot of time with the liver transplant program. And what we did was we would get kind of embedded with a patient waiting for a liver. And so they'd give us a beeper. So if that patient got their beep, meaning your liver's ready, we would hustle to the hospital so we could be part of the story. We'd already met them and what they were waiting through. And I went through 2 of those where the patient, it was not a successful transplant.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow. So did you report that?
well, yes, we did, and it was very difficult because we're basically introducing you to somebody, and then the first patient I think had a stroke during the transplant, and so he lived a few months after, but he didn't live, and then another guy didn't make it either after. He rejected the liver pretty quickly. So those are hard stories to tell because, like your adoption story, you're thinking you've got this climactic happy ending, and the real life part of it gets in the way. And it was. I remember that. I remember sitting down with my news director and saying, "Here's what happened. What do we do?" And I knew the answer was going to be, "You got to report the story," but I needed him to tell me that. Kind of part of my grieving process, both for the person and for the story that I thought I had.
Yeah, that would require a lot of delicacy, huh?
Yeah.
Because you know the family and you want to be respectful of their privacy. I'm kind of respectful of people's privacy too. So that's another thing that I think is challenging.
Yeah. Well, they invited you in for the story because, again, what they thought the climax would be, and that, they allowed you to be part of their lives. And then when there's that big left turn, it's like, oh yeah, unfortunately, I still got to report it. But now that I think about it, the man that had the stroke, let's see, 3 or 4 years ago, I was in Portland. We were out to dinner with family, and I was leaving the restaurant, and the maitre d' or something, I said, "Hey, Mr. Click, can I talk to you?" And he then tells his story that I married the daughter of Mike, the patient you did the story on.
Oh, wow.
And I just got to tell you that they were very, it's really important to my wife that she has that memory of her dad. And, I was so happy that he stopped me to say that, and part of me went, well, there's at least some good that came out of that story. I was really touched.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it touched a lot of people though. And it was also helpful for people to recognize the great need and personalize that. So that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's a cool
it's
story.
it's the kind of thing that those are the kind of stories and news life that I miss, is getting to tell those wonderful stories and the effects that they can have on our community.
Yeah, yeah. I don't see so many stories like that now. Are they doing that? I don't know. I don't really think of local news in that way from what I see, but I don't watch local news very much anymore.
I'm the same way, and I
I
just
shouldn't admit that. I mean,
well, yeah.
it took me a long time even to not read the paper voraciously and to not follow all the news. So it's kind of been a slow 20-year process of, not of disconnecting. And now I'm kind of trying to figure out how to reconnect in a positive way, because sometimes it's either one side or the other. And
We've.
I find myself yelling at the TV.
Yeah. I've had the same transition because when we were in the business, I mean, I got home, I got up from my nap and I watched the 5 o'clock news and I watched the 6 and I watched the national news and I watched CNN because we needed to be informed and we needed to know what was going on. And then when I left, I kind of cold turkey stopped because I didn't need it for my job, and I didn't really need it for me personally. Jill and I here at home, we sometimes have a little battle because, she likes to watch CNN and things like that, and sometimes I get just so tired of what's going on. It's like a really bad music that I don't want to listen to, and so sometimes we have to be in separate rooms if she wants to watch the news and I don't want to.
What do you miss the least, and what do you miss the most?
Well, it's a cliche answer, but I miss the people that we work with, on and off camera. I miss telling good stories. I think, all of us, whether we're a reporter or an anchor or a photographer or a producer, I mean, there's this finding a story and telling it so that it has some impact. I miss that a lot. I don't miss the hours. And of course,
Mhm.
there's a lot of morning news in my 18 of my 31 years was morning news. And I don't miss the hold that it has on you and your family, such as you can't take vacation during ratings periods. Even if your niece is getting married in May, tough luck, you can't do that. And I don't miss we got a big winter storm coming. You got to come in on Saturday and blah 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 blah. Uh, I mean, we understood that when that was part of the business, and we understood that. But once you're out of it and realize you have a freedom of choice that just because it snows, I don't have to get out of bed and stand in the snow all day. That I don't miss. How about you?
Well, it's funny. I was laughing with my husband about, well, I'm not even thinking about what stories can I tell. So he said, well, remember the story about the windstorm. And so there was a windstorm in Portland about 70 miles an hour. And my mom at the time had dementia and lived about 4 blocks away. And so I was on the news, and our kids were very, very small, like, 4.5 and 2.
Yeah, I think you're
And
talking 1995 December was that
and a
storm.
4.5-year-old. And so after the 5 o'clock news, I get to my desk and my husband calls and he says, come home. I said, I can't, there's a storm going on. He goes, no one's watching, the power's out. So in this time, the power was out everywhere because of the windstorm. So he's in the dark with my mom, who has dementia, kept putting her coat on thinking she was going to walk home. And then with all 3 of the kids, and I don't know why he was alone and didn't have anyone else, but he was like, you have to come home. So I go to my boss and I said, I need to leave. And my husband says, well, no one's really watching. And I think he's just, I really need to get home. And he was so disgusted with me that I had to leave. And then the next day we had to all laugh because that was when they had overnight ratings, and literally there were no televisions on because it was a power outage all over the town. So we still laugh about that. But I just remember, come home, no one's watching, there's no power.
I have a similar story. In hindsight, it's funny, but it was kind of a little bit sad. My father passed away. My mother kind of reconnected with a friend and had a significant other. They didn't remarry, but he kind of became part of our family. So, and this is, I'm 30 something, but and we had a big snowstorm. And I was out covering the snow. I'd been there all day doing live shots, being the trooper reporter. And when I got back in the newsroom, there was a message that this man had passed away shoveling snow at my mom's house. Yeah. And I went to the news director. I'd been there all day and said, I got to go home. My mom's boyfriend died. And it went right through him. And he kept going, okay, well, now I want you to go out to, someplace else for the 6 o'clock stuff like that. I said, no, you don't understand.
Yeah.
And it was, again, that's the nature of the business, is it owns you while you're there. And stories like your mom and my mom's boyfriend and other things like that just don't register at all.
Did he ever let you go? Did he let you go? Did you have to kind of shake him or whatever, or he let you go, or what?
I think I stood through that little talk, and then I went to the, assistant news director, producer says, I'm going home. And, nothing ever came of it, but I just remember the reaction was not what you expected from somebody.
Right.
So, yeah, I know you've done a lot of things since you left news, a lot of nonprofit stuff. And you talked about, the long disengagement from the news. What kind of things have impacted your life since you weren't a newswoman?
Well, one of the things that probably people don't know that I've done, because why would they? But I did go to seminary for 2 years.
I knew that. I think you told me that once.
Maybe I was doing that, and that was a really good experience. I'm really glad I had that experience with graduate school. I wish I'd done it earlier. Loved it. I'm sorry in some ways that I didn't stay. I thought when we moved, I would just continue that on, and it just became sort of irrelevant and not sort of clear how I would do that. And we've moved up here 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago. And just moving is a pretty big intensive experience. I don't know if you felt that when you moved even to Central Oregon, maybe not because you knew it so well, but I was sort of amazed by that. And then I wanted to do other things. I wanted to integrate in this community, and I wanted to explore some of the things that I had never done. So we kind of started to remodel our house, which literally has not ended in 3 years. In some way or another, there's been 3 different contractors, and just long story that no one wants to hear. You literally, your ears would be bleeding if I had to go into it. But as a result of that, I made like these glass doors. So I've always kind of done fused glass, but I kind of did some panels and fused glass in 2 doors, so 10 panels. And that was pretty exciting, and it felt like a pretty big accomplishment in terms of my artistic experience and having something that I actually, well, because we have it done and the doors are big and the doors are installed, it's not going away. It's actually there in my house for a while. So yeah, but just
every
stuff like
time,
that.
every time you look at it, you realize that that's your art.
Yeah, so that's kind of fun. It is kind of fun, and I like it. I mean, you always, it's sort of like your news story. There's always a new way to do it, or, so that's what's interesting too. But I am happy with them, and I enjoy living with them. But that's the one thing about art is you think, well, am I going to be happy with this, or just think about wanting to change it each time? Or do you just accept that's as good as it is for that moment?
And the family's good. The kids are good. You're up there mainly, I think, because your kids are up there, right?
Yeah. So our son lives about 2 blocks away. So that's really fun. And his girlfriend and dog. So we see them all the time, which is wonderful. I mean, it's really fun to just run into your kids on the street as if they're your neighbor, and they're walking their dog too. So it's really fun. And then we have our son who works for an architecture firm, and he's really busy. He lives in Capitol Hill in Seattle, and our daughter's in the city too. She's an artist. So she always is doing different things. So it's hard to really pin down but she's worked for Starbucks for a while and did some murals for them and backgrounds, and has done some commercial things, but also is an artist that does digital images. So it's kind of a new way but her name is Neon Saltwater. So if anyone's at all curious what happened to Abby, look under Neon Saltwater and you'll see more of what she does, all the work that she's done. So they sometimes are 3-dimensional kind of vignettes that get put up that are like installation art, and otherwise they're digital images, most of them.
So Neon Saltwater is her artistic name?
Artistic name. So it's like neonsaltwater.com. You can see all that she's doing, or I think it's on Instagram too. So it's kind of fun to follow. If you follow her on Instagram, you'll see like a new picture every couple days.
She didn't legally go Neon Saltwater.
No. She's still so it's kind of her name. I don't know how that happened, but she just, it's a lot. It's kind of, and it also has to do with something called, oh my gosh, I can't think of the music. Vaporwave. Have you ever heard of vaporwave music?
Oh, that's got to be a Seattle thing.
It's not a Seattle thing. It's really interesting, but she became interested in this vaporwave music, and then people said, hey, your art is kind of vaporwave. So that's how she kind of got connected. And if you look it up, it's the first music that does not come out of any locale. It has to do with just people in their homes taking like music from the 80s and then altering it on the computer. Mm-hmm. And sort of changing that. And so I was calling one time for Multnomah County jury duty and was put on hold. And I was like, this is vaporwave music. They have vaporwave music on that. And so I called Abby and I said, listen to this number, call this number. You'll see there's vaporwave on the hold. And so she said that is. So some people know what it's about. It's different, kind of more electronic music, all synthesized, but it doesn't really come from one place. Usually music is, mm-hmm. You've got the reggae beat from here, that type of thing. So that's what's interesting about it. But
it comes from a generation.
Anyway, it's a different generation. Yeah. It's from another generation. So.
Well, Julie, thanks for reliving the good old days with us. You look great. It seemed like you're really happy. I know people will enjoy knowing that you're living the dream up there in Bainbridge Island.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I'm living the dream right now on Discovery Bay, which is the dream. It's really beautiful here. I wonder if I can see if you can see anything. It's a beautiful house that we're renting.
Yeah.
But it's right on the bay and it's gorgeous, but it's not my home, but it is fun. We're living the dream right now, but it's as close as we can get. So
Well,
it's nice to see you, Carl. So great to talk to you.